Speaking Truth to Power, a series of engaging and candid conversations seeking to provide a platform to inspire and empower citizens to become actively engaged in positive change. In essence, do something. This episode features a conversation with Huntsville City District 1 Councilmember Devyn Keith, recorded live at Darkside Coffee in Huntsville, Alabama, and hosted by community activist Remus Bowden.
Hey everybody, how y'all doing? Everybody, this awkward person walking through, that's Gerry Wilson. We give him a round of applause. He's the owner here at Darkside. Thank you for having us, Gerry. You are so dope. All right, I'm not gonna take long in my monologue because this reminds me of my class, but this is the first class I've had where everybody is probably smarter than me. And in this moment, not only am I gonna get to Remus and Russ and how we got here in this moment, but I wanna say this means the world to me. And hopefully to help you understand that, I can just give this reference point. If we go back in time, it's 1951. A guy named James Oliver, he's doing what most of y'all do if you have kids. Around this time, you're deciding what to do next when it comes to your kids in school. He's having a conversation with his wife about his daughter who's in third grade, and they're in Topeka, Kansas. And he says, well, I don't feel like having her go to a school that's 5 miles away by herself. So they're having a further discussion and said, there's a school right around the corner. She can go there. It is not that I have a problem with the school that she's currently going to, but proximity is better for us. Mr. Brown walks into Topeka, Kansas, local elementary school, and is denied access for his daughter. So then what he does, which is what I think we'll talk about today, is something. And that is where you get Brown versus Board of Education. Fast forward, 1955, a guy, he's 26 years old, he's coming from Atlanta, has curly waves, slick back hair, wears a suit really nice, talks really cool, and has no clue he's about to be injected in one of the biggest movements to ever happen in American history. So he is asked to come speak at a local church about a woman who was denied access to a bus seat. That young man at 26 years old starts to stammer because he has not had a political conversation. He's used to preaching in exegesis of the text. And in there he says, I have issue and problem with the ordinance of this city. Keep going. I promise I'm going somewhere with it. Fast forward really fast to a guy named Bull Connor, who's in a city called Birmingham. And it is unique because he's in a specialized position as police commissioner. He is over the police and fire, but he gets to set ordinances and restructure hiring for a place like Birmingham. He is iconic at that time as a police commissioner, and then as elected to police commissioner over the state of Alabama, inherently uses his tactics as a police commissioner to intimidate and or try to kill African Americans and anybody fighting for civil rights in the state of Alabama. And finally, let's just make it really close. There's a place called Ferguson. Not too long ago, a young man is murdered. What really happens and reverberates from that isn't actually caught or televised because there's a sweeping DOJ report that looks into some of the systemic issues inside of the city. It looks at the chief. It looks at the deputy chiefs. It looks at the hiring structure. It looks at the amount of money that they were bringing in revenue through ticketing, through citations. And what it finds, without a doubt, objectively, that there's a disproportionate amount of African Americans who are affected by a disproportionate amount of individuals who are non-African American. It results in the firing of 4 individuals of high administrative roles. It results in the chief stepping down. It results in the mayor losing his position, all because of a city making a change. Why do something is so important. Legislation and change has actually never been trickled down. There has not been a broad sweep and a revolutionary tale of influence and political shift. Actually, it has inversely been from the ground up. It has been local impact and change that has changed the nation. And inherently, it is that beautiful thing because it says that your one voice, whether you are a father who cares about where his daughter goes to school, can affect a generational landscape. And why I think moments like this are so important is because if you can synthesize that, if you could actually ask yourself in your mind, what things can I change? And without knowing if you were Mr. Brown or if you were King, what reverberations come from that, would you do it? And I imagine people like James Swergy, who was a freedom rider from nowhere, middle America, who rode next to a John Lewis, never knew the legacy he would hold as he was bombed in Anniston, Alabama. But his idea was just doing something. One of my favorite quotes is from a rabbi, a Polish rabbi from out of Brooklyn, who's seen walking into the Selma March, again, fighting a local state ordinance. And he says, I got tired of praying on my knees and I learned to pray with my feet. And the whole mantra here that has true value is, if you want to see change, do something. You don't have to be affected by oppression to help the oppressed. And what a beauty that is. What a beauty it is to help those in situations you may never experience. I imagine it's tough for the victimized to find strength to fight the oppressor. And I mean that in a larger sense. No matter if it is the disproportionate amount of individuals who live in a polarized poverty place where their school within itself has become an economic deterrent for investment in the community. Because whether you realize it or not, education within itself is an economic tool. And the proximity by which some of you have made decisions to go to school, send your kids to school, move to a certain location is the proximity of the public education in that area. So, if you wouldn't live there nor send your kids to school there, somebody is. And why is that? Why does it look different than the place that you call home? And why do you not call it home? Change calls for us to do something. So I hope tonight, if I can give you anything, in my old age with I think 13 gray hairs now, I'm eventually going to look like Remus by the end of this year. I'd like to talk about doing something and why not only does your presence mean something, but your perspective means everything. If you can change Huntsville, Alabama, you can change Alabama. And if Alabama can change, you can change the South. And if the South can change, you can change this doggone nation. I know a lady who did that in Georgia. So, I'm sure I'm on the hot seat.
You are.
But I can promise you.
He gave me some good segues.
I am thankful, and I want to say again to my brother here and to everybody here, these moments are great, without a doubt, because I feel like I'm looking at a choir and I'm singing, harmonizing without a doubt in my soul. But if you don't leave here and challenge yourself and or others to do something, you have wasted mine and your time. And for some way, somehow, some generation from now will be impacted by either what you do or don't do. Thank you.
All right. Councilman Key. So that's a good segue, right? So he talked about a few things there, and he knows he's opened the door, of course, to some great questions that are going to come his way. But going to the microcosm of it and moving to a more macro level. Let's start there. So I'm always hitting this guy up, hey, add some more plants to your diet. Hey, add some more vegetables to your diet. Hey, add your... So recently...
Only eat vegetables, you should say.
So recently, our last conversation, I found out that this guy has switched to a plant-based diet 4 days a week. 4 days a week, which is fine. I'm a vegan myself. So I'm going to hit this up first. Why? Because I do patronize this place. And unfortunately, there are a few items. I'm not going to say there's none. There are a few items that are vegetarian and vegan friendly. But now I'm asking, how about throwing a grilled cheese on there for your boy, chow cheese, some nice grilled pears, and throw some jalapenos on there, and we're great. We're golden.
Woo.
You can call it the do something, the Remus. I don't care what you call it. But I'll definitely come in here and I'll buy that thing as often as you sell it.
I think that it's going to be, oh, that's loud. Is it too loud? Yeah. Well, I think that if I had to, we'll just put the one in the middle on blue. I'm actually not going to call it the Remus or the do something. I'm going to call that gentrified grilled cheese because that sounds very non-North side. But that being said, Remus is right. Self-discipline is wrapped up in that idea of healthy living. And I have tried to cut back because for some reason I think Remus will live till he's 120. And I just want to make half of that. And yeah, we have, and I'll just speak on Dark Side very quickly. We have learned a lot. And some of the things that, you know, my brother right here, Jerry Blue, when we set out, it was not to be just a coffee shop. It was to be a place and space like this. And then we found out that the second you open the doors for input and perspectives, you have to add to the menu. So we're looking like Cheesecake Factory by the time we get done here. But I can promise you, Blue can nod to this, by, I'll say June, you'll be happy. I don't know if it'll be chow, but you'll be happy with some of the items that are added. And we will consider the Remus.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
We're going to push for that. That's going to be our first push to do something. We're going to get this brother to throw a vegan sandwich on the menu. But again, talking about the discipline that's related to changing your diet, and I tell him and I tell others, if you're able to control your diet, you're able to control almost any other aspect of your life. Why? Because eating is probably the most important event that takes place in our life on a daily basis. And he spoke to the fact that, hey, you know, if we can do something at the Huntsville level, we can do something at the Alabama level. My intent is that we galvanize this place. So going to June, right, if we're, fast forward to June, you know where I'm going.
Yes.
Going to June, we're approaching a year now. Now, there's a group of us who have been consistently spending 3 minutes a week or every other week just rambling off, I guess just blabbering as far as they're concerned, but actually going up to speak and trying to remind and hold accountable the city council on the things that, you know, they've promised to do. So I'm going to hit you. I'm coming at you straight. First question, you know, as we get into this almost a year later, why is it that the city has decided to keep silent on the issue of police reform?
I think, and I will answer it. Do you want to give background to those who don't know?
All right.
There you go.
You have the floor. Go ahead.
Go ahead. I want you to give your background. I'm giving the answer. You give your background.
All right. So as you guys all know, there was an event that took place in Minnesota. Small event. Someone lost their life, unfortunately, which sparked a worldwide movement. A worldwide movement that began in March, and everyone poured out to the streets. Even here, downtown square, packed, probably over 1,000 people on 2 different days that we had here. College students, the young, the old, everybody who wanted to do something. Everyone was just fed up. And after those events, which included pepper spray and tear gas, which we're now looking at the 56th anniversary of the crossing of the Selma Bridge, right, in Montgomery, which included tear gas, nightclubs and billy clubs and horses. Not much has changed. However, if we're trying to change things in this city, we've now been petitioning and asking for our city council members to come back and do something as far as a meaningful police reform initiative here in the city. To that point, we haven't really received any word. However, we do have a board, a council, HPCAC, which is reviewing the information. And again, my question is going to be, why has the city not done anything? Because that event, in my mind and others, can take place completely parallel and separate to the need for police reform in the city, which has been called for numerous times and consistently. And the fact that it disproportionately affects your district is really why I'm asking how Northside is silent. How's your district so quiet, knowing the effect that police reform would have on your district in particular?
Absolutely. Let me answer this in its totality and why I love this question. If you get a chance on your devices, if you type in police reform 2017 Devyn Keith, things will pop up. Actually, a specific plan of police reform 2 years ahead of what happened with George Floyd, because I currently am on my 15th year, it feels like, but 5th year as a council member. And the concerns that Remus have and other individuals will have are in response to police tactics, without a doubt that I agree, are egregious and overreaching in their impact on everyday citizens to do, which again, I was at that protest and involved as well, what they have the right to do. But reform is different. Response is one. Reform is different. We're going to have a response to the incident that happened over a year ago, or close to a year ago, within the next 45 days. And because of that, that response will call for an action. And what Remus is correct about is that that action should correlate to some sustainable impact of reform. And that reform, in my opinion, should look like a number of things, as I stated back then. So you should ask yourself, what causes issues systemically? Is it people or is it policy? As you think about it, inherently one would believe it's both. Remus referenced something that happened at Selma, where individuals were commissioned, told, and given the ability to enforce unjust treatment on people who were absolutely well within their rights. Well, I would argue that if you back up inside of that the individual who calls for that action is where reform should start. So let's go back to Ferguson. If you have a police chief who's been there for 6 years, they've now had the ability to hire, on average, you have two a term or a year, let's just say 12 police classes, cadets. Inherently, their police department at Ferguson was over 80-something% non-African American, but the arrest rate for their whole city was almost 87% African Americans. So you have now put in place a group of people and empowered a chief to create individuals who do not look like the people that they police. And I'm not saying that you have to look like the people they police. I say that almost in quotation, you should have a view of the people that you police. So reform, in my first point, is that we do not have hiring practices that encourages and or incentivizes people who look like the people they police, and inherently incentivizes those people who do not to be of the community that they look like they police. That's the first perspective. The second perspective in the policy aspect is community policing inherently is, I think at this point, a wide swath without some level of true direct view. I believe it in this way. If you are of a community and you are policing it and you do not speak the language, literally, or inherently the cultural language, I'll give an example. If you pull up to off Drake, there's a Hispanic community off Hood Road, and you do not speak Spanish and you are called for a domestic violence case, what place and position do you put yourself in? You do not speak the language and you do not speak the culture. What happens when you're on third shift and nobody speaks the language or the culture? You have created systemic issues that have no point of reform because you do not have the person or policy. You don't have a person who speaks Spanish, and you don't have policy that says this is how you should act around communities of this background. So when you talk about bringing police officers in, when you talk about policy and impact, I now get to where I'm at now in reference and response to you're correct. What you're gonna get is not gonna satisfy you. I'll say it right now. You're gonna get a response that says this is what happened and this is our perspective as a council. And to everybody out there, hearing that response and having a qualitative, quantitative, and objective view means absolutely nothing. In 2008, I didn't have to tell you that the economy was bad. You felt it. What you wanted to hear from me was, how are you gonna fix the economy? So the issue that has happened in local governance, especially around policing, it is that we've identified that a knee on the back of somebody's neck is a bad thing. What we did not realize is that that was a tactic taught for 15 years. And the individuals who were training people to be in that position were empowered for 15 years to hire people and consider people and train people to do that. So what I will say is, you're going to get a response very soon. And then the next question is what you're going to do about it. And that's what I think is important. My view is that you have to empower and incentivize individuals of different diverse backgrounds to become police officers and or peace officers, that you have to go out and get a third-party reference of some value to show that the community itself has a connection to the police and that the police has a connection to the community. Because all these police officers, right, wrong, or indifferent, some signed up for different reasons, are honestly uncertain of how to connect. If you have not bridged the gap to go there and back, you've done a disservice to your police department. We do not have a reform right now that does that.
Well, so there was a SMART reform that you proposed. Also, before we go into SMART reform, I would like for you to go over that. But to your point, it's not the system, is what it sounds like you're saying. It's the actors in the system, which I've always said is the reason why we have systemic and institutionalized racism, right? I mean, however, the system was not particularly designed with us in mind.
True.
But it continues to perpetuate when you continue to put people in power who continue to subscribe to ideas such as white supremacy or white extremists, right? Just in the very nature of saying white supremacy, you're now giving power to a force that I really don't think should be honored. They're extremists because their goal is not really to be normalized within society, but to change things. So I'm saying that to say, as we circle back to this, we've known these things. I was in high school. I was in high school when Rodney King was beaten. 92, I was pretty much the same age my son is. 92. We've been talking about these same issues. I like to listen to comedians. You listen to Red Fox. You listen to Richard Pryor. They talk about the same issues with police. Now imagine if you owned a company that made cars and for whatever reason that wheel popped off of that car while you were driving it every 10,000 miles. How long would that company stay in business? Why is it that we, as all of us have ownership into this entity called policing, yet we have no real say into it? It's like we're spending money, but we really can't even make any decisions on who's, because again, right, we still have the people who are in power, the chief who we really can't elect or appoint. That's done by the mayor, right? So
you can.
I know where you're going. I know where you're going.
I saw him walk right into it.
I know where you're going. But okay. The thing is, we can, but why is it that we are not doing it? Since this is an issue that has been going on for years, since the inception of policing, this is nothing new. Why is it that we continue to have this issue?
I think you answered it. Congratulations, Remus. You are asking questions and answering them at the same time. That means that you are a natural. So raise your hand, just be completely honest. If in the last 2 election cycles, in the municipal elections, you voted, we're going to shame everybody else that didn't raise their hand. So I say that to say, you absolutely decided in some version on who the elected official in your city would be. But guess what? To those who didn't raise their hand, you did too. So because we have not demanded a change in leadership at the highest levels, again, you can say that as a presidential impact. Right. There is an impact to the mayor. And I'm going to just give you a quick synopsis. Local leadership is the most direct leadership in the nation. It's the truest form of democracy, right? The mayor himself has a small militia called the police force. The city council within itself is Congress. It's the Senate and it's the House. And we have true power and majority. Getting that majority is tough in cities like this because representation is redistricted. We'll talk about that, I guess. But at the end of the day, the local power of change and reform really lies in a small few group of people. So I'll say, the reason you have not is because just last term was the first African-American named Mayor Reed in Montgomery. a city marred by African-American suppression, at one time the capital of the Dixie. And not too long ago, inherently Birmingham gets its first African-American mayor, and police reform within itself has a potential opportunity of change because leadership can change as well. What I'll say to you all is that impact within itself is a direct effect. It's not a trickle, right? It is a switch. The mayor could call right now and say, Chief, I want everybody to wear green outfits. You know what you'll see tomorrow? Green outfits. And if confirmed by the city council, or at least 3 of us, it's an ordinance, it's a law. It won't change. So if it's that direct, how indirect is your touch? Do you have expectations of individuals, but not yourself? Because I can tell you, I cannot usurp Mayor Tommy Battle without the efforts of 2 other individuals. I cannot set precedents to do so. And my community knows that reform for police is on my agenda. But I can't carry without the help of others. So, Raymond doesn't like to hear it. The truth is, sometimes I am singing in the shower. I sound so good by myself. And others have not joined in that effort. And until that accountability, which I've said before, you've heard me say it, until the issues of others who are not affected by the issues becomes priority, it won't change. And that takes people, again, you do not need to be oppressed in order to change the oppressor, to make impact on it. And it is actually a better place to affect those, and you are not affected. So, though it might not be the answer you want to hear, and others as well, the reason that you keep having this issue is because the people who create the issue are still in power.
Okay, so you're basically saying that we need to go and vote.
Ta-da!
Right. Okay, so, but with that said, it seems as if, well, I don't want to say it seems as if, it is, right? This is a continual fight. Right. And of course, they're looking to you to be the champion for this issue. Ordinances don't come to the table because I guess the chair has control of what we bring to the table.
Ta-da!
Break down that process. Why is it that you haven't, what would be the point of you bringing something to the table, or why haven't you brought anything to the table with the change in chair? But previous to the change in chair, I know the mayor's a stopgap, but let us understand, help us to understand why we don't see any movement right now. Is there a reason why nothing's being offered to the table?
Yes, and I think, again, you're doing awesome. I don't even think I have to speak. I don't have the power to do that. And being removed as president, in my 2 years, again, as a city councilman, you are dealing with issues from ditch maintenance to too many neutered cats to not enough, to police reform and economic development. Choosing by which you get your colleagues to really care about is a tough uphill battle when your colleagues are dealing with gargantuan successes that include an amphitheater all the way down to worrying about who paints the field on their softball. But that being said, I say it again, I have proposed things to be considered, and council members have said they won't second it or won't carry it. The biggest issue, I can't say, and I will say right now, we need an African-American chief. If you don't have a deputy chief that's African-American, you can't go and say, I need something, and then when you go to the drawer, there's nothing to grab. So we have a systemic issue of leadership, specifically to the police, where we don't even have anything to draw from as a consideration because it has happened decade after decade. And I want to just put this into scope, right? The next youngest council member is 63. I'm not going to say no names. That person is 32 years older than me. Had 3 decades of city influence and impact. The mayor himself, who is 3 decades plus older than me as well, has had the same impact, right? Just imagine that on the police force. That the administration right now has a district chief that's been there 44 years. At one point, 3 of my colleagues entered politics when it was non-integrated. There were no African Americans of representation. They're from a totally different Huntsville. And asking them to reform and recalculate the Huntsville to be it's asking them to be in a different place and space in their own mind. That pressure cannot come from me consistently, because inherently it works against how they entered political programming.
Right.
So the reform, again, is not just needed in its policy. That's without a doubt. You've actually been completely right on that. We have undermined the impact of reform through people. If somebody has been in office for over 34 years, if they went to a non-integrated school,
Right.
their perspective on education inherently could be different.
Now, completely understand you on that one. But when this decision come out, when this review comes out, what is your proposal? Are you going to go down the road of your SMART plan? Do you have something else as a result of everything that has been going on? Is there anything in particular that you're looking to get going soon as they have the decision? Are there any things that you have lined up? Or are you waiting to see what the decision is? Because all of us, I mean, I'm presuming that anyone who was downtown on the 1st or 3rd is expecting a particular type of decision to come out just because the eye tests don't lie, right? I mean, some things are pretty obvious just on the surface. However, I understand there's always layers, and there's qualified this, and there's no accountability here, and there's this other guy did this, and it wasn't really under my chain of command, and I really don't know who actually started all of this. Where do you start? Where are you going to hit the ground running? What are you going to pick up and carry soon as this review comes back? And let's say it doesn't. Just give me your response both ways. If it comes back positive and we're thinking, hey, this should really propel us, or be like, they didn't find anything, nothing's going to happen.
Yeah, I think it's important to know, and everybody's asking about the review. The review by the board is also being carried by a legal team out of Birmingham. What they're going to give to us is what we consider, like we do in grievance hearings, matter of fact. This is absolutely what happened. This is the correspondence between the police force. This is the correspondence of what happened. And then they're going to leave that up to us to decide what that says. So in making the assumption it says, something bad, again, I was there. I don't think it was necessary. You can take those steps to say we don't need to use tear gas. We don't need to call in 4 agencies. We need to be very realistic in what our threat level was. But I think, again, I don't think those are needed to talk about reform.
Right.
I think that reform is a personnel currently in the city of Huntsville, a personnel issue. And if you cannot point to progressive levels of impact that are not directly correlated to color, so impact of thought, so female lieutenants, it is without a doubt one of the highest statistic correlations that female officers have the lowest amount of negative reviews and or IA complaints. Hispanic, Spanish-speaking individuals, multicultural individuals inside the police department, impact reform, and then policy review. How do you take correlative data and see where African Americans and or anyone else is pulled over the most? Why are those individuals paying all of these discretionary fines? And why do those fines seem to funnel and fund municipal court? Right. There's so many reforms that branch off from this, but then it comes down to 3 votes. And if you didn't know, 3 votes in the city of Huntsville does whatever, without a doubt. And the power of that has never truly been understood, in my opinion, because rightfully so, we're the byproduct of a successful economy. We're the baby sisters of Redstone and the big brothers of Madison. And because of that, we find ourselves in this gray overlap area of success.
Which we is this?
The city of Huntsville.
City of Huntsville. So your feeling is that the entire city of Huntsville shares this feeling of the success of monetarily, the success of the upbuilding and the renewal. I mean, there's still people who are looking around like, this is still the same Huntsville. They're getting new buildings. I mean, there's a young, older lady who comes in every other Thursday with us, and she talks about all these buildings that are going up, and what are we doing? We're building these roads, and we got the roads, and,
Yes, so the majority of Huntsville is experiencing a large amount of success. North Huntsville, which I represent and was born into, is experiencing success as well, not as in the same way, and cannot, in my opinion, because of the Delta, really capture the same amount of news and or attention. But I think, again, we should be very proud that Huntsville has the potential to be something. If you were fighting this argument in places like Greenville, in places like Greensboro, if you were fighting this in the Delta, this room would look a lot different. And our views would be a lot different. But I think that the reason that your argument actually has value and everybody else's concerns have value is because it can be done.
Right.
And if it can be done, then you should fight for it. Now, we might disagree on how it can be done, because I believe it's by whom it can be done versus how first. But, I don't think we don't get the egg without the chicken or the chicken without the egg. I just think that the value is agreeing, especially in this room, that there is a potential for change. In some places, I'm just going to say, in places like, I don't know, right before you get to Birmingham, starts with a C, places like that, this conversation doesn't happen or have value.
Right.
So I think, let me just be completely frank in my councilman hat.
Thank you.
It is a really tough job because I have to make decisions with considerations of not only the mayor, but my colleagues upon people who just aren't from my background, aren't from my side of town. And for them to care, that bandwidth is very thin.
Don't we have a new office for that now?
Oh, don't get
for
started.
Diversity and then
Let's get to the questions. Let's get to. I'll just say it this way: if you're getting your first diversity, equity, and inclusion office in 2021, but I mean, I guess I'm starting a healthy diet in 2021. So better late is never. Never late is better. That's what Drake said.
And you're up there as well. So the expectation is, I mean, that you're gonna push it from the top as well. I mean.
I love these expectations, Mr. Remus. I love them. Listen.
Why not? Why not you though?
I'm gonna put a resolution up there that says Devyn Dictator Day via Remus, and I'm gonna get it seconded so that whatever I say goes. But the reason we have the diversity, equity, inclusion is because I pushed for it a year and a half ago. Now, again, what that becomes and what that molds into has to be the work of me and my colleagues, because I have to get them to vote on a budget, on a director, on a direction. But it's been a long time coming, long overdue, and I'm just as frustrated as you that it took this long. And building it from the ground up is just as frustrating.
So, kind of switching here, because and I've said it before, I think all things kind of sprout up from DEI, from social justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion. I think that's kind of the ground floor of everything, whether it be police reform, whether it be the pothole in that district, or the buildings here, dilapidated buildings in these communities. I think if we were really going to be a city that works under the guise of diversity, equity, and inclusion, it should show. Like I think the value, and I was talking to one of our other councilmen, and I was telling him the value of a freshly paved street. Now I grew up in Jackson, Mississippi. That was my birth. That was
South.
Right. But I actually did my formative years in California, Southern California, hint the accent. But no, when you think about it, when I go back and visit, there's potholes in the road from when I was a kid. Still. But then there's communities where the streets are nice and paved. And the energy from that community, even though it's the same community, they just have a new street. It's so much different. Talk to us about the power of just equity in the city. Like, you have a new development that's about to go up here. What's the feeling of, what's the energy behind that new development? And how do you see that actually playing a part in changing your district, changing the outlook of your district and how people are feeling about, hey, District 1 has this coming, and we may actually be able to make moves and do something in another direction, per se.
I love this side of you. Economic development. I'm going to make this because I really want to get to questions, but I want to say this to y'all, why this is important. And hear me, because this discrepancy isn't spoken about. Specifically, he's talking about the move and building of the city school system's new annex location, our new actually office location to be up here on the Parkway. A project we've been working on for behind the scenes for about a year. This actually came on the heels of them being told to not come to a community that had nicely paved streets and nice homes, because that community thought that would bring attention that they did not want. Inversely, my community, with the biggest open arms, hug, kiss, grandma, welcome, cookies and everything, said, come on, we'll take you. What has happened, and it is without a doubt frustrating and decades of rebuilding and rebranding and equity, is that we have polarized poverty in the city of Huntsville so much so that the Delta gap to catch up is insurmountable economically. It would have to be a restructuring socially, educationally, and without a doubt, there has to be a variable that is spoke about in its view. You can't carry these social views of town. So I'll just give a quick example. One of the perspectives that happened when we spoke to the realtors when we were developing a property up there called Johnson Legacy is that one of the news stations, I ain't gonna say no numbers, wrote on an article, and another murder in Northwest Huntsville. This was 2.5 years ago. And I called them. And it was an argument, to say the least. Because what does that tagline carry? Now, that person won't tell you that murders had gone down since our impact plan in 2017. And that inherently every district is going to experience another murder after the first one. But when you see the tagline, and another, in Northwest Huntsville, it carries a social connotation as it's being shared. Because and I had another article that said, a murder in Southwest Huntsville. But that wasn't the only one, and that wasn't the first one. So we are carrying these social connotations that we have to fight. So any economic development says, okay, you can build there. Oh, okay, you can make money there. Oh, okay, people want to be there. Oh my God, there's a great cup of coffee off the Parkway. These are things that change the social connotation that are so important. They have no variable, they have no quantitative data, but they're just important because without a doubt, my colleagues, people who are in other elected positions have a disposition about Northwest Huntsville and other places of poverty. This is what's really interesting, and I really want you to take a second to think. Raise your hand if you live in 35810 specifically. I'll do it. Okay, I see you. All of you care about this city, and only 2 people are inherently living in the poorest zip code. I've moved 4 times into the most impoverished zip code census tracts. And in those areas, if you were to correlate the voter data, one of the lowest voter turnouts. And many people say that it's frustrating. They need to know their power. I absolutely agree. But inherently, right? For somebody like Miss Candy, who lives off of Venona, who takes care of her grandchild, what has the city shown that incentivizes a vote? How many times have you seen people that look like you come down your street and ask you, are you gonna join the cleanup? She did not know that the city council had changed when she met me. If you do not create a governmental system that takes City Hall to everybody's front door, what value is in a personal connection with politicians like this? I won't make a decision on your behalf because I do not know you exist. I do believe all things are rosy and great in Huntsville. That's why I keep saying there is no poverty, there is no need, there is no issue.
Does that make the ones that we want to listen go deaf to it? Like, are they like, oh, well, there's no this, there's no that. Why do we need to even invest any time or effort into these places? I mean, Councilman Keith's happy. He has nothing to worry about over there. He's getting the new development. Why even put forth the effort to even care? Our district is great. Things are rosy over here. Why do we even care? And I guess, go ahead. I'll let you finish that one before I.
No, I think that's what we're saying the same thing. I'm saying that every little victory is a point by which I prove you should care. It is not the victory of 5, it's the victory of 1. It is the success for 5. That we all can say, this success for Northwest Huntsville is something that is good for Huntsville. But the argument inversely is that when a tagline reads, and another murder in Northwest Huntsville, that doesn't affect them. That affects me. I have to fight that tagline. So the issue becomes, again, you have to convince people who are from other places and spaces to care as if they lived in it and understand it. And that level of political empathy is what you should vote for. That is what you actually should consider. Policy will come. I've learned some of my best policy from people who wear coveralls and have good conversation, policy and understanding will come. But if people do not have an empathy as itself in its totality for the people around, you have missed the boat on potential promise. Because of long-term incumbency, as we know, a person will hold a position and only care about those things that got them elected. And for some, that's just a pothole. But if you want to have a collective change, it has to be more than that.
So power, I would say money, I mean, being one of the main driving issues, especially just as the country that we're in, right? Capitalism is key here. Like, everything is about how much money we can make, how successful can we become, not really about how happy of a community we can be. I mean, I guess I might be one of the few who's like, yeah, I'll drive a little hybrid. I just want to be happy.
I was going to ask you about that.
Yeah, that's me. I'm the tree hugger guy, right? But I really truly believe that people will experience more happiness when they see communities around them being built up, and we're not dealing with issues where we're so disconnected, right? We're so disconnected, and we're trying to get other councilmen to care, or other people in the city. And that brings me to the diversity aspect of it. How do we get this? How do we make this infectious idea that, you know what, even though I'm not in 35810, I'm really concerned with what may be going on in 35810, especially that I'm not in 35810, but I read the paper, another murder. I know people there. That's not the case. You know what I mean? How do we get that narrative to now become a unified narrative that, hey, we need to change these little things in our space that we can actually affect, so that we can now have a Huntsville that's equitable across the board, and not just in some places, and people moving to certain places because they want experience, or they want certain schools, or they want certain shopping. I mean, why is there that disparity? And that's one of the things moving here that I wasn't really keen on. And I was talking to my buddy here, and I was saying, hey, so, you know, the disparity in the schooling is based probably directly on the taxes, right? The tax dollars at the houses here in the community. Is that the case? I mean, is that not generally the case? Is Huntsville a different breed when it comes to the funding that goes into the education system versus how they set up things and where they push their resources to, and why some of our schools are pretty much predominantly minority and some are predominantly white? Like, why is Huntsville still in that state? What's going on there?
Yeah, and Russ, I want to make sure, are we good on time? Because I do want to hear questions. I'll be really short on this because that could go all day. 1971, we have the desegregation order that hits Huntsville. Inherently, we do a little different. And there's a lady named Miss Herford who is here, who is direct descendant of somebody who made an impact on that integration here in the school system. But the issue that happened is that the correlation of economic success had a bigger impact on education. And I'm not here to give my capstone presentation, but urban renewal happens. Influx of Europeans, Germans happens. A quick, direct delta gap between the median income of somebody who is non-African American and African American happens. So what we knew to be suburban sprawl was actually different. It was economic attainment. So what you had in places where two individuals were making moderate amounts of money in the African American community could only attain so much for a number of variables. That house correlation was specific to the housing market that they were in. Let's just use 3-bedroom, 2-bath. Well, then, slowly but surely, now you have two people making big money. Places like Hampton Cove start to pop up. Places like Blossomwood, South Huntsville. The houses get a little bit bigger, the roads get a little bit nicer. They get on a mountain. Slowly but surely, the city of Huntsville polarizes itself by economic attainment. What it does not do is create a centralized view of the educational system, which means proximity. Because Huntsville is the 22nd largest landmass city in the nation, you have now polarized not only African Americans because of the attainment of their economic income, but by proximity. A student cannot ride to Grissom without being on a bus for 45 to 50 minutes. So argument is made. to the DOJ as we're under the desegregation order, is this legal? Is this right? I don't think it is. But what do you do when you've already built a $110 million high school? And then you go and look at the inverse school. And the high school in South Huntsville is actually bigger than the middle school and high school put together in North Huntsville. I'll say that again. The high school in South Huntsville is bigger than the high school and middle school put together in North Huntsville. With that understanding that you've now made the economic impact and you've polarized the city because of economic attainment, the gap again goes back to who's willing to support as best they can the policies that change it. Educational reform is one of the biggest hurdles holding back equity in the city. I can tell you of a conversation just recently where a developer directly asked me, what are the schools like in Northwest Huntsville? I'm not going to make any assumptions, but I don't think that's one of the questions they ask somebody in South Huntsville.
Do y'all do ratings here? Is Huntsville,
Yeah, I mean,
they do school ratings?
There's state ratings. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So, I mean, again, the success of any school feeder pattern is different. Whether you're elementary school, you're considering your kids elementary school, your middle school, your high school, all those things change. Those variables are true. But the fact that if you don't do it correctly and you make a decision to build out an educational system that has success in a certain part of town, that is supported in a certain part of town, and then to not think that the irreversible effects of polarization from a demographic standpoint and an economic standpoint are not inevitable, you're not living in reality. Poor people will go to poor schools and do poor. That doesn't mean inherently that people cannot be successful because of their economic background. I am telling you that the resources correlated to the success of somebody are direct. If you have more resources, you have more opportunity, thus you have a better chance. There are awesome students at Jemison High School and McNair Middle School that are doing their best. But to believe that with more they can't do better is not true.
So that gap that you speak of, that's that delta.
Right.
Is it achievable? Is there anything potentially on the table that can change how we do that as far as the city, as far as you got the power that the dais has, as far as, I mean, I'm from California. We have magnet schools.
Right.
People would get bused 40 minutes to go to a school that was specializing in science or math or the arts, from affluent neighborhoods to less affluent neighborhoods and vice versa. So it wasn't just a one-way street. How, or is that even on the table? Is that something that we even talk about here in Huntsville? Is that something that they're even you guys are even discussing as something that you would like to tackle?
Yeah, so raise your hand if you did the census. Be honest, if you did the census last year. All right, why that's so important is because it's going to bring up redistricting this year. And why redistricting is important, not to go back too far, but that'll affect where people go to school, who they vote for, what happens in their representation.
So for those who are listening, redistricting, what is that? You're just going to change how the district is set up? I mean, you're going to redraw the lines? What does that mean?
Redistricting is redrawing the lines for the consideration of population change.
So I'm in District 5 now. You're saying I could end up in District 2 or 1? Like, I mean...
It depends on how I feel that day, but yeah, I might just gerrymander you out of there and put you in South Huntsville. But there's a tremendous power for council because they decide also on the school boards districts. And they're, just not to go too deep, but the real issue that happens is that there is not going to be, in my view, a true systematic change of investment, whether that's ad valorem money or whether that's federal funding, until a leadership change. You got to think that the most successful school, as we might know it, is a private school called Randolph. They have a direct correlation of the actual zip code to the school. Really? Now, I'll say that again. They're not driving or busing people in. Randolph is having people from around the community pay to go there. So if that success is correlative to like economic attainment, I keep saying this again, economic inequality. I'm not talking about, again, some level of overturning the system. I am saying that there was never an investment to create a form of work appreciation, as I call it, and that's workforce development and in-housing workforce diversity. So that could be specific to, if you want to develop in Huntsville, you have to hold off 15 to 25% of your units to be rent subsidized units and or to be rent capped. So that a person who can afford $1,000 rent, maybe not $1,000 mortgage, $1,000 rent with 2 kids can go to school in Grissom. But if you are charging $1,800 and you need a deposit of $2,800 and you need a credit score of 750, that person's not going there. So the economic attainment gap has systematically pushed out and separated a large swath of people in the city of Huntsville. And I go back to everybody who raised their hand and said they don't live in 35810. You guys can care and do care about a place and space that you don't live in. What if you were a councilman? So if you care and you would do something, but you're not a councilman, if nothing is happening, what do you get from that?
Well, I'm pushing it from the ground up.
I'm not disagreeing, but I'm saying if nothing is happening and people have been in office for decades.
Yeah, it's time to change. And that's
I
hear where you're going. You're throwing me the softball.
I'm just saying.
I saw it.
Like you knock it out. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and that's why we're here. I mean, to be honest, this is a podcast of trying to get everyone civically engaged, right? Because all of these things start at who we vote for. Right now, we have a county commissioner who's fighting right now to get federal rental assistance for people here of Huntsville. Fighting. Why is that? Why is she the only one fighting for that? And that's why I reached across. I want as many different looks and faces and people from everywhere to be aware of what's going on. Because this isn't going to just change with my delusional optimism, even though I would be willing to go and talk to everyone. But this isn't just going to change with my delusional optimism. This is going to change by you having those conversations at home, at work, with your peer groups. Hey, this isn't, something needs to happen here. And that's why I bring all of these different things up, because these changes happen with us. We are the people that make the changes. And this is why I wanted to bring as many people here and get this as far across, because I'm looking to galvanize Huntsville. I'm just saying it. It's not for me personally, it's for us. This isn't something that I'm doing for me. I want us to thrive. I want us to see the power of change that we have and just working together, calling things out, and actually doing something. And I think that we can do something. And I'm starting now after our last voting session. Voting's coming up soon. Everyone needs to be knowledgeable of everything that's going on in their city and their community so that they can make these changes. And I mean, okay, why is that? And so I'm going to ask questions to my own ignorance. Why? Because I think other people have these same questions and they're just not as, crazy to ask them like me. But speaking of questions, we passed out cards to everyone. Did everyone get cards and pens? Cards and pens. Write down your questions. We're going to take a small break. Everyone can get something to drink, some coffee.
Shameless plug. Go ahead.
Dark Side Coffee.
Yes. Or hot chocolate.
Dark coffee, North Side.
Come on.
But yeah, no, we're going to take a quick break. Everyone, did you need a card?
What if you're really long-winded and that card's not?
No. Send an email.
Yeah, no, he's in the hot seat. He'll have a little time. He'll have time. But no, we're going to go ahead and take a little break. Everybody start filling out, writing your questions. We'll get back to the questions after our break. Get a little bit of music. Thank you guys so far, this first segment. Next segment coming up, we'll do some Q&A. Hold his feet to the fire and get some answers. All right. Thank you all for participating, getting your questions in. Let's go ahead and get it started because time is limited. I want to be punctual and observant of your time here, respectful. Regarding the city council and voting for senators and congressmen and judges, why aren't there more Or why isn't there more information shared with the community about these individuals? In other words, it sounds like they're saying, why is it that it's not community knowledge about our senators, and why? I guess answer that. Why is it not more? Why is it not out there in the public as much?
You know, I mean, this is just my subjective view of it. In all honesty, especially in states like this, I actually just think it's a cultural thing. And I can only say that from the city council side, as a city councilor, it is really hard for me to get out of my box of knowing everybody in politics and such. If you are not directly connected in that way, the state of Alabama's cultural perspective is that we know who's the starting offensive line for Alabama and Auburn. If you go to a state, I spent 5 years in Boston, that's all people talked about. Everywhere, at all times. So to answer that directly, the city side, the information that is shared isn't as easily digestible as maybe I would like, but the information is there, who's on boards, who's your senator, who's your state senator, all the above. But I think culturally, it has not become a thing or a place of topic in a more common way, unfortunately. And we care more about who's going to win the Iron Bowl, and we can discuss those individuals a lot easier.
Right. Okay. Next question, gerrymandering and redistricting, we kind of talked about, has a lot to do with equitable representation, which we alluded to. Is that going to be addressed, gerrymandering or gerrymandering?
That's a good question. Define addressed. Yeah, so when somebody says fix it, you got to, again, go back to who's fixing. And a majority of council has to approve a district line. So for me to say, am I going to work on it? Absolutely. Will the outcome be what I believe it should be? What has history showed us? If the people in positions of power don't consider it a problem, it will not be fixed. That is like a really tough thing to say out loud, but that's just the facts. You can make a truly objective empirical argument about disenfranchising individuals, and if the people who eventually get to make the decision could care less, nothing's going to change. And that district line will stay there for 10 years. Now, I will say, because of the Voting Rights Act, there has to be a minority-majority district in the city of Huntsville. We will never get above 5, more than likely, because of equitable representation. But unfortunately, it goes back to economics. Until you have a swing shift of empowerment, until from the 8th floor, which is the mayor's floor, down to the 7th floor, which is our floor, cares about the community, there's just no end goal in sight, in my opinion.
Okay. We got another one from Facebook Live.
Are
right.
y'all really watching?
Body cam footage. Your favorite
Chad
subject.
Chavez.
Your favorite subject. What are your thoughts on citizens' access on police-involved shootings, especially when a citizen died? And we've had a few die here recently in the last 6 months.
I think next of kin should have, we've already had this, I can rattle it off. Next of kin should have the ability to approve it if the officers are reviewed and have time frame of which they are reviewed and the decision is made. So inherently, again, I use like grievance hearings. If it is a 14-day process of review, nobody in the public should have a chance to review it before the reviewing committee. And then after the reviewing committee has a chance to give a final perspective, there is no reason, unless inherently, again, it is the decision of the first of kin to say no. Some people absolutely don't want that body cam footage shown. Then it should be public review. And I think that this works in both ways. A lot of police forces are starting to turn to it. But you can now, as a police officer, say, we did the right thing by showing body cam footage. And some do. Well, you can't just stop there. You can't only cherry pick the right decisions you made, which they do in a lot of cadet trainings. They say, this is when a police officer had to make a split decision and almost cost him his life. Absolutely correct. This is should be shown in the same setting. This is when an officer made a split decision that affected somebody's life and they should have never made it. So you can't have your cake and eat it too. I think body cam footage should be shown directly after the internal review, and if the next of kin and or whoever has rights, a wife or somebody or a kid says that it can be shown, it should be public review. Now,
Public review.
Yeah, public.
Not just internal review, but
Yeah, it's
public
public
review.
consumption.
Okay.
I think that the other thing too, though, is that if an officer is involved in a shooting and the officer does not want his or her name or badge, and again, when I say involved, they show up on the scene, they're standing as a bystander officer. Some officers don't even want to be in that picture because they say, well, how did you let that happen? I've heard officers say that. Like, yeah, I would love for body cam footage to be shown, but I showed up on the scene and I was having a conversation. I don't want to be seen in that video. So I do believe as best you can take those individuals away from that level of accountability inside of that experience as well.
All right. That gets into that stance gets into a whole nother ball of wax for me of saying, hey, I was there, but I don't want to be seen. To me, that speaks to another level of accountability that we inherently already believe that, police officers don't want, unfortunately. But that's my opinion. That's my opinion.
Yes, it is.
Moving on. Another Facebook. Why do you think minority students don't do well in South Huntsville?
Who in the world asked that? Let me just make this assumption. By well, you don't mean academically. I believe any African-American and or non-African-American student who applies themselves, no matter the location, can be successful. But if you're talking about socially, I could only imagine what it is like to leave, and I've said it before, the tale of this two city, that you grow up in, we'll just say a place like Meadow Hills, and you're a minority and majority, and you end up in a community and or a culture where people are attributing their frustrations to, daddy didn't buy the right car for me when I turned 16, and in relation, you ride a bus wherever you go. Your mother depends on 2 or 3 jobs to make sure they make rent. It's a cultural immersion that can cause not necessarily trauma, but a shock, because you can't understand how this person is from Huntsville, you're from Huntsville, but you live 2 totally different worlds. And I always say this, there's no need for a foreign exchange program. You go get somebody from Grissom, Randolph, have them live on Venona, on Medeiros for 2 weeks. Have them experience the same public services, have them shop at Save-A-Lot, have them shop at Lucky's, and then you tell me what that impact will have. You don't need to go overseas and take pictures with African babies. You don't need to go to Haiti. Those things are wonderful in the missionary work that happens. You can domestically see the difference in economic attainment, economic empowerment, and disenfranchisement right here in this city. And if we were more aware of that, the culture shock and immersion would be totally different. And I think I'll say this and I'll always be done.
Thank you.
We are very proud, and I'm not going to say any names, when academic attainment is seen in one place and when athletic attainment is seen in another. There are some proud all-around Huntsville people who play for Alabama who went to Jemison High School. That's about the care and concern where it stops. And the investment and expectation is that he's a Huntsville boy because he went to Alabama, is doing great on the basketball court. But when you didn't know where he lived and it was a trailer, or if it was off Stringfield, that's not a Huntsville boy.
All right. Also, to that point, the amazing idea. I haven't really heard of it outside of in a joking fashion when we were younger. Hey, why don't you come live over here so you can see how it really goes on? Something I don't know. Something you since you have all power, in my opinion.
Omniscience as well.
No, right. Why don't we push for programs like that? Is that just something that the community at large are just like, or particular communities or our school board? Like, where would we begin with something like that? And why don't we push for something like that? That would really create a more empathetic society, in my opinion, to see, the living conditions and how other people get down.
All right. So, to be completely frank, going back in history, it's been a very busy first term. I offered police officers 1 year of subsidized rent and support if they lived in certain areas. That was a real program. All you have to do was sign up. Those places and spaces that you could live were not the Avenue. They weren't in Madison. But for an incoming officer who's making their first $44,000, who's single, you're paying 50% less than you would pay anywhere else for a house at that time. I even went as far as to purchase a house on Sonia Drive from Habitat for Humanity. How many people do you think signed up?
One.
No.
Zero.
Yeah. And again, these are people who I would imagine, and I don't hold it against them, are to feel the safest. Right?
You would think.
You would think. You are to feel the safest if you are a police officer in any location
Anywhere.
in Huntsville.
Yeah.
So, why I don't think people... Oh, I wish Dexter was here. Short story. Sorry. Noah. There's a picture of me. I was the greatest baseball player to ever play at Stony Field. I pitched a no-hitter when I was 11 years old. Anyway, Noah is this little guy. Oh, man, he's so awkward. It was the first time I ever saw somebody wear goggles. I couldn't imagine. I was like, can you see with him? He's like, that's the reason I'm wearing them. But Noah, there's a picture on my Facebook, little Noah. His dad was an engineer. I'm talking true engineer. Like, look really, really dorkish, worse than Doc Brown. Like, he is absolutely, had the pocket square, didn't know anything about baseball. He said that he brought his son to Stoner Field. I will never forget that. He sponsored our baseball team. He brought his son to Stoner Field because he wanted his kid to have different experiences. Now, he said that to us, and we were like, this is the weirdest, you're the only white boy in the whole Stoner Field program. I say that to say, I will never forget Noah and his weird dad, who were great, because his dad did something intentional to make a difference in his son's life. Right. I think that I don't know anybody's backgrounds here, but if you are not immersing your family and or friends in experiences that would widen their horizon, do not have the expectation that they would have an understanding of your community and culture.
All right. Next question, because time is limited. It says, I agree with you. It's so important to vote to create change in your community. However, on November 2020, the ballot, there were many elected positions that were unopposed, something we've talked about in different circles here. Are you doing anything to find support for viable candidates? So do you groom viable candidates? Are there viable candidates
Don't
out
be
there?
like me. What about you?
I'm for the people. Yeah, no. Anyway, don't try to avoid the question. So
flames. Let me say it this way. I never wanted to get into politics. I really just wanted to travel the world, have a bunch of girlfriends, have nice cars, make a lot of money. I'm not lying. I went to Boston to get an education to really just make money. And this was not the path of my life. My grandmother was here, and she laughs every time. She was like, y'all really listen to this kid. Because inherently, I was so vehemently against Huntsville, the South. You ask anybody, my brother Blue, who was here, he was like, bro, I don't know why we here. But I'll say this. There's two avenues that happen when you go look for a candidate and you pick somebody, or when a candidate comes and looks for you. If there's not a view by which you are interacting with somebody you believe could be political and run for office, of that working with that person and learning from that person has a value for all, there's no point. And I think that I just showed up one day. We never thought we would win. If you don't know, the person before me took office the day I was born, as ironic as that, and had been there for a long time. He's the first African-American ever elected. And I stand on his shoulders for the work that he's done, but we were not supposed to win. So I say that to say, especially at local races, they're non-partisan. That's why the work, like the Stillmans, what they do in empowering people to vote in a non-partisan race is that one of my biggest supporters lives on Hilltop, and it's because I paved this road, but he had a Trump Pence sign in his yard and a Devyn Keith sign. And he looked like Santa Claus, and he had a rocking chair from Cracker Barrel. I mean, he couldn't get more American and Dixie at the same time. And he was born in Pulaski, Tennessee. Oh. So I say that to say, there is this way that can happen in local elections where you have this cross and you traverse between generation and community and culture, where the impact is, can you do right by me, for me? And inherently, do you care in a way that is tangible, that is not just said in the 5 minutes of council comments, and it's not just spoke when it's time to run for other positions?
Good stuff. So these are going to be good segues, because It's one of the questions. If we don't live in your district, and we did vote in the 2020 election, how can we serve the community best to speak up? And there was another one along the similar lines is, how are we heard? Like, what do we do in order to make the most impact in our district? To set my representative, to get my representative to pay attention to progressive policies that affect other areas in our cities, attend city council public meetings and share town halls. Like, what do we do to be heard is the question, is what it sounds like.
It is a body. Some of you are going to be the feet, hopefully good feet. Some of you are going to be good arms, good ears, good heads. You're all going to do different things. What I do believe is not talked about enough, because Remus is going to do that 3 minutes for you just fine every Thursday. Boards and commissions. If you do not know, there are boards and commissions here in the city that are appointed by ourselves that have the economic attainment and influence of over $1 billion in the city. They control your utilities. They can control your hospital rates. They can control the IDB board. And I'm not trying to go that deep. But the question is, if your representative has never, and even if you're involved or not involved, if you were to go back and it's online at our city council boards and commissions, if you can correlate the term limit and time frame of your city council member and their appointments to the most powerful boards in the state, and none of those individuals are diverse, none of those individuals are from the district they live in, because it shows their address, and none of those individuals have changed, that's your impact. If you really want to have an impact on the utility rates, I don't know about y'all, but I just cut off my leg to give it to Huntsville Utilities, you have to be on a board or a commission that has that direct impact. And you empower people by giving them those positions. So though some of you will be there at council, some of you will share, some of you are called to positions of power, and you must demand opportunity to be so. You will be intrigued if you took time to look at our boards and commissions to find out how much power resonates just outside of the council. For good reason, because you don't want council to be within itself quid pro quo, but inherently, if I was to look at some of the donations for campaigns, or if I was to look at who graduated high school with them in 1954, there's a lot of correlation. So demand to have opportunity. Opportunity. I can't make council member change, but opportunity to represent your city on a board and commission.
Now, how would person A go about getting on these boards and commissions?
There's an online, which we did 2 years ago, there's an online process that I have to give my hats off to Councilwoman Akridge. But, I mean, I'm the same person that's just like, if I see you in Walmart, let's talk. You have to demand an opportunity in front of your council member, because I get it. Let me just tell you, I get it all the time. But I've tried to diversify it, not with just color, but age as well. For those young folks in the room, I would say the average age of our boards and commissions, when we did our best guess, because we didn't want to be too intrusive, is most of the individuals are above 60 years old. And on the top 10 boards, as we call them, tier 1 boards that control about $1 billion, no, there were only 3 women, and there were only 4 minority out of about 60-something positions.
So that brings me to a similar question, and that is just the impact of coming to city council speaking. Chris, myself, others, we drop our 3 minutes. We see the top of most of your heads. We see a little scribble here and there, an occasional glare if it's something that was, I guess, said that was a bit uncomfortable. What is that impact? Like, really, outside of us making and being this squeaky wheel for the city, what is actually our impact? How much of what we say is actually either acted upon, thought upon, even discussed further?
Well, I can answer this in 2 forms. One, somebody has to be listening to you because you're sitting next to them. You've literally been to my house and discussed these issues. And we've discussed some of the frustrations that you have and why those issues haven't come to fruition. And to everybody, Russell, everybody, when you come up there for your 3 minutes, I imagine, not to be overglorified, this is the same perspective that happened from 1955 to 1968. What is it to ride a bus? What is it to sit at a counter? What is it to write a senator? What is it to yell, to march? What is it? What does it end up being? And I'm going to tell you, you don't know what moment has the impact that changes everything. But if you don't have the moment, you'll never have the impact. You're going to get tired. You're going to get frustrated. You're going to, honestly, you're going to get on people's nerves, and that's a good thing. You're going to cause trouble. You're going to push the envelope. And though it might not be somebody that sits on that dais that respects you, there might be somebody that is watching. Or it might be somebody that sits on that dais that doesn't respect you but hears you. So I say this to encourage you all. Absolutely push the envelope. Getting frustrated means that you are aware that you are doing something over and over and over again and not seeing the results. But how great...
Are we crazy?
How great is it to...
Are we crazy?
You took the words out of my mouth. How great is it to be crazy about good things?
Facts.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You're so enthralled in trying to do good things, you're going crazy.
I'm okay with that, I guess.
I mean, I would hope so, because other people could be crazy about other things, about storming the Capitol, about a fraudulent election,
Right. Or about building new prisons.
about building new prisons. People are going crazy over bad things. You're going crazy over good things. It's gonna pay off, because again, you cannot say that you have an example of people doing crazy good things, or you don't have an example of people doing crazy good things and then paying off. There's plenty of examples of that by which we represent a day and or a month. Or inherently, I'll say it this way, maybe in your life. I don't always like to just pick specifically to some Black history. I could do that for days. Somebody in your life was crazy about you in some way. Your mother, your father, your aunt, your teacher, your minister. And they did some good things to make you who you are today. And I'll be damned that the bootstraps you have in this very moment are the byproduct of somebody else's work that you don't use, though, to help somebody else have bootstraps. So yeah, I guess the question is not do something, it's just keep
Continue.
going. Yeah.
Keep beating the drum. So along those lines, right? So we talked about the fact that it takes 3 votes to get something done, and we've had one candidate who was recently elected who ran on the idea that he was going to enact some changes as it relates to police reform. I actually had a conversation with him myself along those lines. So I am aware, and I continually remind him, like I continually text you about becoming a vegan, and I go up there every other week about my spending my 3 minutes to talk about these things. If that is the case, and we know that Acreage as well share similar ideas as far as getting police reform done. Kling has also expressed getting police reform done in the paper here more recently. Are you not collaborating with them? How is it that we have 3 or 4 different people who are saying, hey, we're about police reform, but yet these 3 votes are being defeated because we can't get 3 votes?
I mean, it's beautifully wrote and rapped. But I mean, let's be real. Remus, I mean, at the end of the day, if you don't believe I had the votes to do something, it's on your shirt, that those things wouldn't be done, then you're not being realistic. And it is tough. Again, I get it. I know what lip service is given. But there's not a more reachable, more accessible, more honest individual who sat in front of the dais and or yourself. And this is the burden, Remus. As the Black young man, I have to be the answer and the antagonizer and the creator and the initiator and the fighter of all things.
Yeah. I don't envy you, but that's what you signed up for. That's what you signed up for.
Why is it that we don't have that level of accountability for everyone else? So if the person you stated said that they were going to initiate some level of reform, why you need me? I'm the choir. Hey, initiator of reform, I know Devyn gonna be on your team. He got a T-shirt with your name on it.
Oh, I already said that.
So
I've been angling all over the place, bro.
Because again, people have a value to speak to those things that affect them directly and or affect their ability. And I go back to, I ran on police reform. It was a pillar of mine. And then the next year we did something. It has stalled in its impact because, again, I don't have the same support to do everything I would like to do. But I think that's going to come. I think there's going to be change, and I think this report has a value. But you're so right. You're right. Why hasn't something happened?
All right, man. I'm going to move on. Is there a plan in place or in the works to reform Huntsville Police
Yes.
training? Also mental health.
Yes.
You've made some move recently on some software that could potentially be helpful
Yes.
in these areas. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Well,
and when we can see that maybe come to fruition?
I love data. If Chad Chavez is watching, you're right. There has to be a data to get a baseline. I definitely agree with that. I love when he talks about that because that perspective is needed. And what we don't have right now is our awareness to the data that impacts, the police. And the reform that's needed is not just how many times police pull over African Americans. The reform that's needed is on what shifts do most police have issues or issue citations, and what areas and time frames by which do we see the highest amount of complaints? So is it at 11 o'clock on Thursdays, people in North Huntsville get pulled over the most, and then those same people correlate to the most issues? We don't have that trend line data. Because then that tells me something's wrong with that third shift.
Right.
And I think that's an inherent thing because I've been arrested twice, put in handcuffs, and pulled over 5 times since I've been council member. None of them have resulted in any fine, any prison. I mean, I don't even drive that crazy, so there has to be a correlation after 5. Not once, you can pull the body cam footage, I've watched them all. Not once did I say, hey, I'm Councilman Devyn Keith. I speak with a confidence now because I'm aware of who I am.
Right.
But if that's the case, what happens, again, it goes back to, as best we can have a view through data, why does it keep happening in the red spots mapping? The red spots so often.
What are these red spots?
What are these red spots? Everybody knows the red spots. These are the places where the data cannot be denied, where we do issue our most citations, where we do make our most arrests. And if somebody tells you it's just crime, they're lying to you. Because that could be called a service, but that could be idle time and assumption, which a police officer has the ability to make. That looks suspicious. I'm about to go over there. Again, I say this in every way. Police officers being trained to make assumptions is an awesome, amazing, wonderful thing that has saved lives, countless amounts of lives. What if I told you that your social disposition and your implicit bias compounded that? That you growing up having never been around African Americans but only seeing what the TV shows them, and admitting that you've never been in a community that you police or looks like you police, your social conditioning will affect how you assume and presume how to interact around people.
So, great answer. Speaks more to police involvement, knowing the people who they're dealing with, of course. But back to the different districts and how we all work together in trying to get a unified push for change. And this question says, if District 1 councilor has an issue, but D2 and D3 don't have the same issue or won't sign on for an ordinance, let's say, then what could or should D1 councilmen do to inform D2, D3, and what should D1 residents or do to involve and get those of D2 and D3 and the other residents involved to understand and even care about the issues that are going on?
This is again, as crazy as it is, and I feel like I've been in this in 40 years, and I'm going to go ahead and tell you. District 1 cares about Huntsville. I have the best constituents, no disrespect to you all, lovely lady, in District 1 in the city, because when the amphitheater came, they said, this is great for Huntsville. It wasn't in District 1. When Blossomwood didn't want the school system, District 1 said, we'll take them. When District 1 sees success for the city of Huntsville, it's a natural thing. But other individuals in the city don't ask the questions of what's going on in District 1. They can tell you about Campus 805. They can tell you about Bridge Street. They can tell you about Mid-City. They can tell you about Ditto's Landing. Because they're asking inherently thinking about the places they'll travel to and they'll experience. The problem that happens is outside the district, they don't think about District 1 because what's the point in going there? What reason do they have? So the question would be to your council members, what things are you doing to make all of Huntsville great? That includes a district that is not the one we're in. Because if there are successes all around Huntsville, I feel like I can call Huntsville home in its totality.
Okay, shift the gears. There are a few more questions that were similar to that. Essentially, just how do we create and get the other districts to care and basically promote empathy in the other districts. But moving on to another question, the monument's down. You and I had conversations about that.
That's a conservative
In and
cloud.
out.
Good work.
Right. Monument's down.
Do something. We did
Monument's
something.
down. We did something.
All right.
We did something collectively.
I agree.
We did. Now we have this school called Lee High School.
Oh, that's not me, so that's the
Well,
school board.
I mean, again, so explain to those
Oh,
who,
okay.
because that's why I ask these questions, because these questions I know
Okay.
the answers to, but that's the whole point of this. We need to inform those who are listening so they can understand what you can't do, where they should go if they need to get it done.
Yeah, so, and I don't know what the new statute is at the state level, but just like they named Mae Jemison, they used to be Johnson, the city school board has the power to rename any school. That is not allowed with the council. The council does not have any impact in any way on naming a school and or changing the name of the school or any other thing. The city school board has that power.
What's your impact on the school system as a city council?
Money.
Is it just financial?
Oh, yeah, it's big money.
But
We have
no.
ad valorem perspective. The city of Huntsville does something unique. We give money on top of the stipulated money. So we give another $25 million specific to capital. It's almost like a block grant. So the school system in the city of Huntsville was actually very well and financially stable. The issue, because of the segregation order, is what is equity, and that answer has not been received at this point. I would like to see less brick and mortar, more people, pay teachers more, invest in the best teachers to stay longer.
All right. So, last question. I think I know whose question this is. If streets are public space, how do you feel about the idea of complete streets for bikes and pedestrians, infrastructure?
Who are y'all geeks? Anyway.
Seems like a little gentrification, or is it just mobility justice here we're dealing with?
Oh, can I say something about gentrification?
Absolutely.
It's like sugar and grits. For some, it's terrible. For most normal humans, amen. Well, others would say, shall be the salt of the earth. So the idea of gentrification goes back long before, but I'll just say it this way. Inherently putting in public space that is invested with a high yield return aspect. So like if I build a park, like Johnson Legacy, to last 50 years, and the standard by which it is built is an economic empowerment to the community, there is no gentrification because it does not push individuals out, but inherently it anchors them down. I want to live near this space. Lantana is an example. So blighted buildings have a negative impact on economic vitality in an area. 4-mile radius is most what people say. If you make an investment in the complete streets, as they were saying, sidewalks, LED lighting, beautiful roads, greenery, nice setbacks, that is an economic increase to the people around them. So I'm about to make your house worth more, and you didn't have to paint your front porch. So I believe in it. I think gentrification has been an overly simplified word. During the Urban Renewal Act, it was treacherous and impacted a number of communities and cultures, including Huntsville. But inherently, right now, the investment of public space and the need for investment in public space is economic empowerment.
All right. Seems like we're getting close to our time. I definitely appreciate the opportunity. I'm glad you came and you sat down with us. I know the people who are watching are listening. They're learning. People have come up to me in between our little break to say, hey, there's a lot that, he actually touched on that I really wasn't aware of. And that's kind of the point of this whole thing,
right,
is that we can make people aware and people can be civically engaged and know what it is that they can actually do so that they can do something. So with that said, You're off the hot seat. I appreciate you coming. Let's give him a hand.
Thank you. Can I say one thing before I leave?
Absolutely.
So this seat is the coldest hot seat in the world. But I want to say to all of you, thank you. When you go share this conversation in whatever, sex that you're in, please, please, don't forget to give some level of perspective that you came out here to be educated and to learn, but also that you came out here to go do something.
Right.
So finding out that do something might not have happened in this time frame, but I hope that you're more motivated to find out what that is. Somebody in this room might potentially run for office, and that's exciting. But I also want to say that people like Remus, and I hope we can give him a round of applause. My man. I have a box of veggie meat that I'm going to give you as a gift, but I say this to say...
Make sure it's vegan, please.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thanks.
I say this to say to everybody here who's in his same situation, don't get tired. Get frustrated, but don't get tired. Because once you are voiceless, there is no voice.
Right.
And I think there's high yield returns. Maybe not in the time frame that we want. Okay, let me say it. Not in the time frame that we want, but a change is happening. You wouldn't have been able to tell me this could happen 3 years ago, right here in Northwest Huntsville, in a room full of people who I've already found out don't live in my district.
They want to do something.
They want to do
They want to do something.
And that's because of the work of people like yourself doing something. So to Russ, to everybody else, Doc, thank y'all. I'm proud of y'all. And welcome to the dark side.
Hey.
Speaking truth to power. Like, subscribe, comment, share, do something.